Hi, my name is Katie Flynn, and I'd like to welcome you to SavingForCollege.com's 529-day webcast, sponsored by College Advantage. College Advantage, Ohio's 529 program, has over 600,000 accounts and almost $10 billion in assets. Families throughout the country have trusted the highly rated savings plan for over 25 years. College Advantage 529 offers two plans, the College Advantage Direct plan managed by the Ohio Tuition Trust Authority and the BlackRock College Advantage Advisor 529 plan managed by BlackRock. Each plan offers a variety of tax-advantaged investment options to provide the true benefits of saving for your child's college education. I'd also like to introduce our moderator for today's event, Veronica Dagher. Veronica is a senior wealth management reporter for the Wall Street Journal and is also the host of the Watching Your Wealth podcast and the Save It or Spend It video series. You'll also find her as a frequent guest on the Fox Business Network. Thanks again to our sponsor, College Advantage, Veronica, and all of the panelists. We're excited to have you all here today to help raise awareness of the importance of saving for college and the benefits of 529 plans. And with that, I'll hand it over to Veronica.
Thanks, Katie, and thanks to all of you for joining us. We're really excited that you're here. You already sent us some great questions. We're looking forward to getting even more questions for you during the webinar. We also have an excellent panel, which I'm excited to introduce you to. First of all, I just want to congratulate you all for listening today and taking an active interest in this. As you know, the cost of college is pretty high and pretty intimidating. However, there are some ways you can handle it and some ways you can help your child so they're not burdened with student loan debt when they graduate. A 529 plan is one way to handle some of that cost. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, answer your questions, and give you steps on what to do next. We're also going to have some fun polls, so we're hoping you can interact with us that way and take our polls, share your opinions, and share what you're interested in. So without further ado, I want to introduce our great panel. Martha, I'd like to start with you.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Martha Bullock, and I'm with the Florida Prepaid College Board.
How about you, Brian?
Sure. Brian Boswell. I'm the Vice President of Research and Development here at SavingForCollege.com. I've been working with 529s in one capacity or another since about 2001. I'm really excited to talk to folks and help you get on the right track to save for college. If we can inspire a few of you to go out and open a 529 plan, then our mission is accomplished today.
And Ben.
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Gibbons. I'm the Director of Marketing for the Ohio Tuition Trust Authority. We're the sponsor of the College Advantage 529 plan. In addition, we are the program manager for the College Advantage Direct Plan. I'm happy to be here today. And we've been in operation for over 25 years, and I've been with the agency actually since a few months before Section 529 became law back in 1996. So been around for a while.
Great, welcome to you all. So I'm going to launch our first poll. It's going to appear on screen in a second, so please take a moment and give us your answer. And the question is today, who are you interested in saving for? So if you could select who you're looking to save for and cast your vote, we'll give you the results in a second. I'm going to keep that poll on screen for a moment or two. I want to get to some of the basics though. So Brian, can you just give us an overview? What is a 529 plan and how does it work?
Sure. So a 529 plan is a state-sponsored or institution-sponsored municipal security that allows you to grow your savings tax-deferred. Every plan is going to be a little different. They're structured very differently from state to state. But in general, the goal is you put your money in, it grows tax-deferred, and you can take it out tax-free if used for qualified higher education expenses. Which naturally means, what is a qualified higher education expense? That's going to be tuition, fees, room and board, your rent for your apartment. It's going to be your computers and other associated technology. So you put money into a 529 savings plan. You select an investment inside the plan, which is going to be, an age-based security or static portfolio, or maybe you're using a prepaid 529 plan and it grows at a rate that's predetermined by the state. But the goal here is that this is a federally, the federal government introduced this legislation so that the states could create vehicles to allow their constituents to save for their higher education in their future. Put your money in, take it out however many years later, and get some great tax-deferred, tax-free savings.
Great. So a lot of great info in there. There's a lot to unpack. First, I want to go through some of the basics. Martha, can Can you break it down for us, generally speaking, what the difference is between a 529 plan and a prepaid college savings plan?
Of course, great. A prepaid plan will allow you to prepay the future cost of college, either through monthly payments, could be over until the child actually matriculates, or over 5 years, or you can pay in lump sum. And a savings plan, you're actually investing in the markets, and you get to choose your different investments. Most plans have several different portfolios and individual funds, everything from very conservative money market all the way up through international stock funds.
Got it. So it looks like our poll is closed, so I want to share the results to see what everyone's thinking right now. And it looks like, okay, so it looks like most folks, about 67% of our listeners today are saving for their children. And then, well, kind of a distant second, 15% are saving for grandchildren. So we've got some great results here that we're going to dive into a little bit more. So give us, how do we start at? If we want to start a 529 plan, what do we do, Ben?
Well, part of it depends on the channel in which you're approaching it. If you're coming in from the advisor sold side, you'll be working directly with your financial advisor to get that started, sitting down with them. Doing this, one would hope, as part of a collaborative effort, looking holistically at all of your finances, your investments, and your savings. On the other side, for most of the states who are offering a direct plan, I can specifically speak to Ohio circumstances. You would come directly to our website, enroll online. I think states probably have some uniformity in terms of what information is requested of you. Someone will need to be named as the account owner, whether that's a parent, grandparent, some other family member who's opening an account. And then you'll name a beneficiary as well. That's the person for whom you're actually saving. Again, whether that's a child, grandchild, niece, nephew, yourself, whatever the case may be. It's not uncommon also for states to ask for someone to serve as a successor owner, that person who would serve on your behalf, heaven forbid, if something should happen to you before the time comes for the child to actually go to school. I think many states also give the option of enrolling online, skipping the paper process, and doing things as quickly as possible. Generally, most states will have a minimum contribution. That's what you're looking to invest to open the account and get started. I know in Ohio's instance, it just takes $25 to open an account, and that $25 is the first investment that someone's making into their account to get started, to get their money in there, and to allow their investments and savings to start growing tax-free at both the state and federal level.
So the minimums vary by state, right? What about maximums? I mean, there's probably not a whole lot of people who have that problem, but what is the amount you can max out in one of these plans, Brian?
So it ranges, right? Every state. So the way the law is, I'm not going to go into law. I'm just going to let you know the maximums tend to be somewhere between $380,000 to $500,000 in terms of the maximum amount you can put in. And after it reaches that amount, you can't contribute more until that cap is lifted. And generally that is done once a year in most states. But like I said, every state is a little different, so you got to check with whichever plan that you're using.
Good point. So we've got a question from Kenny, and Kenny's asking, how much money per month should his wife and he contribute to the 529 to make sure his son has enough for college in 18 years? He is 9 months old now. Martha, any thoughts on that?
I congratulate you for starting to think about this now. That is one of the most important points. So there are many different tools available. The myfloridaprepaid.com website has several calculators that customers use. In general, the other thing that's really important is that not every family needs to worry about saving for every penny of what the child might need for college. Many families, their goal is to save, between 1/4 and 1/2 of the expected amount. So if you are looking at one of the tools and you see a tuition cost and room and board and everything of $20,000 plus a year, there are ways to go ahead and manage that expense from the get-go, including looking at having the child attend a state college or community college and being able to stay close to home, which would also help limit some of the room and board expenses.
That's a good tip. Brian, any thoughts on that?
Sure. The rules of thumb vary depending on who you talk to, but like Martha said, you can go online and use one of many calculators. We have several on savingforcollege.com that you can use, where you punch in the age of your child, and you can kind of adjust some of its assumptions as to what growth would look like. I just punched in a minute ago, actually, while Martha was answering, and right now it looks like for a child that was just born, you'd have to put in about $465,000. I'm sorry, $465 a month to meet a goal of covering projected cost of about $215,000 to attend a 4-year school. But like she said, you don't have to cover that entire amount. You can probably rely on some amount of aid. Typically, folks are paying about 33% of the cost today. The most important thing isn't to worry and get so focused on that number. $465 a month, I can't afford to save that. Just save something, right? Ben mentioned earlier you only have to put in $25 a minimum amount. Some states don't even have a minimum amount. You just need to set up payroll contribution. So just get started and put something in is the most important part. You can always increase the amount that you want to save at a future date and rerun those calculations.
Right. Take one step at a time. That college bill isn't going to be all due tomorrow. So
exactly.
Small incremental steps is always a good thing when it comes to financial planning. Ben, you had mentioned something, and I want to touch on it a little bit more. Explain to us the difference between buying a 529 plan through your advisor versus buying it on your own.
Sure. Again, very common within the industry to have those two different channels. One is the advisor sold channel, working with that trusted financial partner, presumably someone you may already have other investments with. They're, as part of their spectrum of financial advice, they'll be giving you some guidance and direction as far as which investment options within a particular plan might work best for you based on your risk tolerance, your comfort levels, how long it is before your child's ready to go to school. Again, you would be working through that planner, that financial planner, and presumably they're going to be helping you quite a bit, not only with getting started, but setting up those recurring investments as well, which are so critical to grow your account. On the direct sold side, it really is the do-it-yourself channel. It's the customer making their own decisions, again, availing themselves of tools and calculators to determine their risk tolerance, their time horizon, to compare other savings and investments that they already have, and then determining, based on some of those questions that they might answer, which investment options will work best for them. Again, based on comfort level, investment risk tolerance. The investment profile for someone who's saving for retirement might be radically different than someone who's saving for college because, one, you've got a shorter horizon, and two, it's your child or your grandchild, and you want to be sure you have as much money there for them when they're ready to go to school, presumably at age 18. If things don't work out on the retirement side, you might be saving for a couple of years more, working a couple of years more, and that's that. But on the direct sold side, I think many plans, certainly ours and the tools available for savingforcollege.com, provide as much information as possible to help those families, help those individuals make some informed decisions before they ultimately commit, open the account, and start saving.
Brian, there can be quite a difference in fees, though, can't there be, between the two options?
Between advisor sold and direct sold? Yes.
Right, yeah.
So what you're going to find with advisor and direct sold plans, and with any plan to be honest, is there's going to be differences in fees between how much you're being charged depending on what you're investing in and how you're investing. So an advisor sold plan through a traditional advisor, meaning a commission-based advisor, like your broker-dealer, your Morgan Stanleys and Merrill Lynch's, you're going to generally pay a front-end load or a trailing load, right? You'll pay a percentage commission, and the commission is generally going to account for the bulk of the extra fees, right? I always look at that commission as the compensation you're paying to the advisor. I mean, that's how they're getting paid, right? So I try to exclude that from the analysis. Even with that said, the advisor sold plans do tend to be a little more expensive. They'll have some more options. They'll have additional asset classes that you can choose from. You can kind of customize it more. The advisor has more levers to pull, right? So they're going to cost a little more for that reason. Your direct sold plans are generally going to be a little more bare bones. It's going to be mostly comprised of index funds for your S&P 500 and bond funds, that kind of thing. So, you get what you pay for as far as flexibility goes. In general, we recommend going with the lower cost plan that has generally been yielded better results in the long run. But if you're working with an advisor, just work with them to make sure that you understand the plan that you're getting and how much you're paying for it.
Good point. Martha, can you draw a really clear line for us in terms of what we're not able to use the 529 money for?
That's a good question. The IRS, of course, is in charge of what qualified expenses are, and the list is pretty comprehensive. So, as Brian mentioned earlier, of course, tuition and fees, housing, books, that is all included. What we cannot use it for are some other things that college students certainly need, like cars. Can't use it for that. Can't use it for vacations. So, you know, there are some things there that we have some limits. If it is a direct educational expense and required as part of the program, then it's generally something that can be considered under that. So if the student needs a computer to complete the program, then obviously the computer and its peripheral expenses like a printer would be included.
Now, what happens if your child wins a scholarship and you have a 529 plan? How do you factor all that together? Brian, do you have any thoughts on that one?
So if your child gets a scholarship, you can, and you don't need the money in the 529, you can withdraw those assets penalty-free. And I don't think we've talked about the penalty yet, so maybe I should explain what that is first, right? So if you put money in and you withdraw for qualified higher education expenses, it's tax-free when you take it out, right? That's one of the best parts about 529s is you put the money in, gross tax deferred, you take it out tax-free. But if you use it for a non-qualified expense, some of the ones that Martha mentioned also add to that. Student loans, you can't pay student loans with withdrawals yet. That might be changing. We have some legislation out there to change that. Airfare, insurance, activity fees, there are some of these other fees would be considered non-qualified. But if you get a scholarship, you can withdraw those. You can withdraw the amount of the scholarship from the 529 without paying the 10% additional penalty. So normally, if you make a non-qualified withdrawal and you pay that airfare with the 529 money, you'd have to pay taxes on earnings, so any of the money that you've made on the growth on the plan, plus there's an additional 10% tax that's a penalty for not using it for its intended purpose, which is college savings, right? So you need to be cautious when you're making a withdrawal for non-qualified expenses. But like I said, scholarships would be exempt from that. You would pay taxes on earnings, but you wouldn't pay that additional 10% penalty on earnings, and that's the ding you get if you're using it for anything other than college expenses. So
and
they
Veronica,
won't for that, right?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Prepaid plans, prepaid tuition plans are a little bit different. For example, with a Florida prepaid plan, someone, if they receive a scholarship, they would then be able to request a scholarship reimbursement for the amount that the plan would have paid the university or college from that semester. So they'd actually be they wouldn't be penalized at all for receiving the scholarship, which is a great benefit of prepaid plans.
I see. Let's talk a little bit more about the impact on financial aid 529 plans have. Ben, what do we need to be considering when it comes to financial aid and 529s?
I think the biggest question to be mindful of as the time approaches, as you're getting close to college age, who is the account owner? I think that's probably the biggest variable. Typically, the account is owned by the parent. If that's the case, this gets treated as a parental asset. It gets included with all of the family's other assets. And typically with a parental asset, the parents are expected to contribute 5.64% of their assets towards their children's expected college needs, college expenses. So if you're looking about an impact on financial aid, particularly on the need-based side, that's the percentage we're talking about, which all things considered is fairly nominal. I mean, I think the average person would prefer to have $1,000 in college savings along with maybe a $1,000 grant that had been reduced slightly to offset that 5.64% versus not having either one. So again, if the parents are the account owner, really a nominal impact on need-based financial aid. Now, if another family member is the account owner, say a grandparent, that's actually not something that's reported on the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid that the student's going to be completing before they go to school. It's not something that's reported initially. However, once the first withdrawal is made from that account, that is a taxable instance. The IRS is going to be aware of that. Most likely a 1099-Q will be generated. And if there's federal financial aid involved, something's going to basically pop there. and that could have some repercussions at the state, not at the state, excuse me, at the student's school as they reevaluate that financial aid package, because all of a sudden there's new money in play that they weren't aware of when they calculated that plan to begin with. So there could be some different consequences, a much greater impact if, for example, it's someone other than the parents who own the account. Many times, though, for families who feel they may be in that circumstance, there can be situations where the grandparents may change ownership of the account from themselves to their child, to the beneficiary's parents, a couple of years out before the child actually gets close to college age and gets close to filling out that federal financial aid form, so they can again put it in a scenario where it becomes a parental asset instead, to minimize any impact on those federal financial aid dollars.
Interesting. So this dovetails into a question from Greg, who's saying, do you recommend having grandparents own the 529 plan to avoid including in a FAFSA? So just wondering, do you echo what Ben says, Martha? Generally, is it better that the grandparents don't own the 529 plan, have that in their name?
Yeah, I don't know that I can actually make a recommendation in that case as far as, you know, which one is better, because I think it's, in the end, it's going to end up being reported, obviously, once a distribution is made. One thing we do want to note, though, is it is generally not favorable to have it in the student's name. It is usually at a different tax rate. So it is better in the parent or grandparent.
Got it. Any thoughts on that, Brian?
I can recommend whatever I want, so I'll make a recommendation. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. It's going to impact how you make withdrawals from the 529 plan, whether it's being held by the grandparent or the parent. And I just want to make it very clear that you know, you can get lost in all the numbers, and Ben, everything you said was 100% accurate. But for people that haven't heard of a 529 plan, just know that financial aid, 529s are treated preferentially in terms of financial aid relative to regular accounts like your savings or bank account. So it's much better to put the money in a 529 plan where it doesn't count as much in the financial aid formula, to be like, you know, the very, very high level view. But whether it's held by a parent or a grandparent, and when it's held by the parent, you take it out as early as you can to make sure that you're securing your tax benefit, because you don't know what's going to happen down the road. So your student goes into college, they're all excited, and you know, if you hold off on making those withdrawals, and then, you know, 2-3 years in, they decide, maybe I'll take a break, or that wasn't the major I wanted to do, and you know, their life changes, which happens with a lot of students. Now, if you're the grandparent, you're sitting with this money and you don't know when you might make those withdrawals, right? So if you're a parent owner, it gives you a little more versatility to just go ahead and take it out and not worry about it. As a grandparent, you want to backload those distributions. You want to take it out at the end of the sophomore year, beginning of the junior year, because of the way the FAFSA treats the financial aid formula, right? Because it's going to be, when you make a withdrawal as a grandparent, it won't be counted until you make that withdrawal, and because the FAFSA looks 2 years back in your tax. Anyway, I won't get into the details, but as a grandparent, you're going to backload distributions. As a parent, you want to front load them to ensure you're taking that tax benefit.
Makes a lot of sense. You brought up a good point. What happens if you have a 529 account and your child doesn't want to use the money, decides they don't want to go to college? What happens to that money? Ben,
Nothing.
You want to take that?
Nothing
Brian?
happens to that money. It just sits there, right?
It's there.
And it continues to grow and be awesome. So it's that's the great thing about 529s, is that unlike Coverdell's or UGMA accounts, or, you know, some of the other savings products that are out there, you don't have to, you know, give it to the beneficiary. It doesn't have to be distributed. It just sits there and continues to grow. So if you're a child, let's say you have more children or you have grandchildren eventually, you can let it sit in the 529 account and continue to grow tax deferred for however long you want. So, oh no, my child isn't going to college, don't worry about it. You can use it down the road for another child, or if that child decides to go back at some point, or you can go take some night classes and enjoy learning to cook, you know. If none of those things are appealing and you just want the money out of the account, worst case scenario, take the money out of the account. You take a non-qualified withdrawal, pay taxes on earnings plus the 10% penalty. In most cases, if you've had it in there long enough, it's going to be better to, you know, you're still going to get that tax deferred growth that's going to be superior to having had it in a taxable account. So, you know, in every scenario you win, having had money saved up.
And so we can, just to be clear about that, we can transfer the account to another child if one child doesn't want to use that, right, Ben?
That's correct. Basically, the way Section 529 is written, you can transfer what's in that account to anyone who is related by blood, marriage, or adoption, which is a pretty broad and generous definition. I mean, that can be a sibling, a step-sibling. To Brian's point, the grandparent selects basically a cousin, the parent. If there's someone else who can use the account within the family, they can certainly go ahead and do so at 100% of the account's value without any concerns about tax penalties or anything of that nature.
Does it make sense ever to have more than, or basically a separate account for each child? Do you recommend that in any scenario, Brian?
So I have triplets, and it's always a good question that I get, and I'm like, well, if you have a lot of children that are very close in age,
right,
from an administrative standpoint, it's generally preferable to have multiple accounts because you don't want to have to switch the beneficiary every time you make a withdrawal. And it's just going to be easier for you to manage to have multiple accounts if your children are within 4 years of each other. But if they're not, if your child is not going to be in, if both your children aren't going to be in college at the same time, you might want to just have a single account for the same reason. Administratively, it'll be a little easier. You can grow one account over a longer period of time, just change the beneficiary when your first child graduates.
Got it. So we've got a question from Michelle, and she's asking, how do I withdraw money from a 529 plan to pay for qualified college expenses, and how do I track it? Martha, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. Most state plans will be able to make payments directly to the college or university, or the account owner can also take the withdrawal directly to their account, as long, obviously they want to keep their receipts and things like that. And that's for the savings plan and a prepaid plan. The benefits are actually paid directly to the college or university.
Got it.
It's real easy to manage. Most plans also have, an ACH, ability, so you're moving your funds and you have access to them when you need them.
Thank you. So we have a question from Vishal, and he's asking, can 529 plans be transferred to another state if a child is leaving the home state where the 529 plan was created? So, for example, it looks like he's in California. And Ben, you want to take that one?
Sure, absolutely. If someone, if someone has to move, they're relocating and they want to move their current investments with one state's 529 plan into another, they're certainly able to do that. Particularly if there are state tax benefits that accompany where they're going from state to state. The state they're in now has a deduction or a credit. They move to a new state that has a deduction or a credit, and they want to be sure to maximize their state tax benefits. They can do that. However, keep in mind that 529 plans are portable. So if you're relocating, you don't have to transfer into your new state's plan just because you've relocated. You can use the money anywhere at any accredited college or university in the country, and you can continue to contribute to that plan that you invested in originally, which might be of particular interest if you're moving to a state that doesn't have a state tax benefit. In that place, you're really doing apples to apples comparison based on investments, performance, and fees, so there may actually be a benefit in retaining the 529 plan that you opened in your original state. As with many things with 529 plans, you have options.
Good to have options indeed. We've got a question from Donna, and I think Donna is probably not alone in this, and so I would love for you each to take a stab at it. She's saying, what if you completely drop the ball and you have a child starting in school in the fall? Is it too late to open a 529 plan to help over the next 4 years? Brian, do you have any thoughts?
Sure. This is always a great question because I say it's never too late to start saving, but you might not necessarily want a 529 if you're that late in the game. So my recommendation our guidance to you would be to look at your in-state plan and see if there are any state tax benefits to take advantage of. In many states, even though your child is starting very soon, you might be able to put some money into the 529 plan to take advantage of some tax benefits there. But otherwise, it may not make sense because you don't have as long of a time horizon. You're not going to be able to take advantage of that tax-deferred growth, and for the most part, you're going to then end up with the restrictions around 529 plans as to what you can use it for, and it might just make sense to keep it, especially if it's in the same year. It might make more sense just to keep it in a bank account or a short-term investment. But you should definitely look at what the benefits are to using your in-state plan, because it's not just tax benefits either. Some states have other benefits written around it. So check your in-state plan first before deciding if you want to invest or not.
Martha, would you agree with that?
I would, and I'll also add one other thing. Many states also have programs. I could talk to Florida's. It's called Bright Futures, that are usually academically based, frequently involve having community service hours. But for some students that are even close to graduation, some of those are still options. So looking into your state scholarship programs, and most of these are GPA based, and then it's not as though you're actually having to be 1 out of 10 people that might meet that. There's actually 20,000 people that are meeting that. So make sure you look into those as well.
Nice. Ben?
The suggestion I typically give folks, unless your child is in the last semester of their last year of college completing their terminal degree, most likely they're still going to have some out-of-pocket expenses, whether they've been saving for years or looking at that first bill in August. It could be the books when a student goes back to school. To the point Brian made earlier, and I would to a degree concur, take a look at your state's plan and also look at their investment options. You may be much more risk averse at age 18 for your child. Perhaps see if the state offers some conservative investment options or even FDIC banking products, so you have that peace of mind with the money you're investing or saving, even if it's only going to be in there for a couple months to take out next semester. I think those can be key drivers, as well as if there are state tax benefits that go along with it to make it worthwhile to make that last minute contribution in December to turn around and pay for books or something else in January.
All great points. So now it's time for another poll. This one is a bit of a quiz. I'm going to put this on screen. So here's our quick poll question. If you take a non-qualified 529 withdrawal, the entire amount you saved will be hit with a penalty. True or false? So please take a second and take the quiz. Let us know if you think that's true or false, and we will let you know the results shortly. So in the meantime, Brian, could you walk us through a little bit more the advantages of saving in a 529 versus saving in another investment options? You had mentioned a savings account and sort of comparing that before, but talk about other options. Like, why should we pick the 529 versus, say, real estate or something else?
Sure. So, well, obviously I believe in 529s very much, working for a company that's almost completely dedicated to them, but there are lots of great savings vehicles out there, and the one that you use may not be a 529, it might be something else due to any number of reasons. 529s are great because they are very versatile relative to other college savings products, and their preferential financial aid treatment, but other options that are out there include Coverdell Education Savings Accounts, which are also great. There's a cap on how much you can put in each year and a ceiling on who can contribute as far as your income, so you have to earn below a certain amount, and you can only put in, I want to say it's $2,000 a year, and the accounts will automatically convert to the child if it's unused when they turn 30. Qualifying U.S. savings bonds are also a good option if you're very risk averse. The problem there is that your return is limited to whatever the U.S. savings bond is making, which is generally a pittance relative to the increase in college costs from year to year. College cost rates are increasing at a rate greater than consumer inflation. They have been for the past, I want to say, 30 years, something along those lines. So qualifying U.S. savings bonds are out there. You can generally turn them in without paying taxes on them if you are making them for qualified higher education expenses. You could check your documents, but they're out there as an option. Other ones that I see cited quite a bit include UGMA accounts. These are Uniform Gift to Minors, the Uniform Gift to Minors Act. They're much less popular than they used to be because there were a lot of tax loopholes that were closed. So I don't go into those too much, but they were a way for you to kind of transfer wealth from yourself to your beneficiary. But there are a lot of restrictions on them now, and they become the legal property of your child when they reach 18. And I don't know about you, but I don't know if I'm going to trust my kids when they turn 18 to use them for their intended purpose, amongst other things. And then the other big one is Roth IRA. Why don't I just save in a Roth IRA instead of a 529 plan? And that's always the big one because people are like, well, I can take out the principal at any time without paying taxes on it. and I can invest in whatever I want, and these are great things. And I say to you people, yes, that's exactly correct, and you should be maxing out your Roth IRA if you can. I tell everyone that yes, your Roth IRA is an excellent savings vehicle, but it's not a college savings vehicle, and you don't want to be drawing down your retirement if you don't have to. If it's a great ripcord if you need it, and you absolutely need to avoid drawing on debt or paying with other resources. But the Roth IRA you generally want to avoid drawing down on if you can avoid it. The other thing is that the Roth IRA does not receive preferential treatment, kind of like 529s do from a financial aid standpoint. Once you make the withdrawal, it's treated kind of like that grandparent withdrawal, where it will count as income to the person's making the withdrawal in the year they make it for that year, the FAFSA that uses that tax year. I know it's getting a little complicated, but just so you know, when you make that withdrawal, it counts as income to either the student or parent, whoever owns it, and income is counted very significantly against the student when it comes to the financial aid formula. So Roth IRAs are an excellent option for saving, and everybody should have one. But I don't recommend drawing on it for college if you can avoid it.
Ben, do you have any thoughts on the Roth discussion?
I basically concur with everything that Brian just said.
Martha?
I want to add one additional point that Brian touched on, which is the dedicated college savings. So many studies have shown that students with dedicated college savings, as little as between $100 and $500, that those students actually attend and graduate college at a much higher rate, anywhere from 2 to 3 times higher than other students. So part of what's happening with having a dedicated college savings plan of some type is this starts to generate conversations in the family. They're talking about going to college, they're talking about saving for college. You can get the children involved in saving for college as well. And of course, don't forget to ask your family members. Grandparents are great for making contributions to college funds as well. So that's a really important aspect. It's the getting started aspect, and making sure that you talk to children about it as they're getting older. So a conversation obviously with a 5-year-old is very different than a conversation with an 8th grader. But it is important to go ahead and have those conversations so the children know what your expectations are.
What are some of the things you should be having in those conversations? Should you be bringing up 529 specifically, Brian?
Yes. So it's funny because I was just going to segue into a discussion about my mother-in-law, who just opened 529 accounts a few months ago in Connecticut. So she doesn't live in the same state I do, and they have a very different tax benefit from what we do in Massachusetts. And she was looking for something to do with her required minimum distributions from her retirement accounts. And I'm like, well, there's this 529 thing that I've been talking about for the past 16 years. You might want to consider it. So it's been, just having those conversations is very important, because you might be introducing them to something that can not only give them a lasting legacy as far as gifting to their grandkids, but you can give them a little tax benefit as well, and it's a great conversation to have in general.
Indeed. So I just want to share the results of our latest poll, and it looks like 88% of you have said false, and 13% said true. So thank you for taking the moment to take our poll, and we're going to have one more before our webinar ends. And so we've got another interesting question. This is from Jennifer. She says, how many 529 accounts can I open? Can I open one for myself, one for my niece? And can I first open the account for my niece and then transfer the account to her parents? So getting a little complicated there. Ben, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I have a very short answer of yes. I mean, certainly you can open an account for anyone you would like. You can open accounts for multiple family members. You can open an account for yourself as well as your children, nieces, nephews, whatever the case may be. All of those things are within the realm of possibility with your 529 savings. And the other thing I'll continue to layer in there might be some significant state tax benefits for doing that. There's tremendous benefit, as Brian was talking about earlier, about saving for multiple children, multiple beneficiaries, and there could be some state tax benefits that layer in there as well to make it very attractive to do so.
Brian, any thoughts on that one?
Sure. I don't think we've mentioned at all that you don't have to use your in-state plan, have we? If we haven't mentioned,
let's talk about that. Yeah. Do we? Don't we?
You don't have to use your in-state plan when you're saving for college. You can use any plan in the country. There are some plans that restrict participation to their own residents. So, for example, if you live in Louisiana, only you can get access to the Louisiana 529 plan. It's a great plan, so take a look at it. So I just want to make sure that folks know that you can invest in any state plan. Your state, we always say go to your in-state plan first because there might be tax benefits there and scholarship tie-ins and matching grant programs. There's all kinds of great perks that many states offer to their constituents, so you want to start there.
Got it. And
Now,
so this, Martha, go ahead.
Veronica, prepaid plans do work a little different. Generally, prepaid plans are for their state residents only. However, the benefit can be used out of state as long as it's for an institution that is accredited.
Yeah, it's probably also worth mentioning that there is one additional plan that's not sponsored by the states. It's the private college 529 plan, and it's run by a consortium of qualified higher education institutions, folks, in fact, including my alma mater, Rensselaer, and you can invest in today's dollars, and it grows kind of like a prepaid plan in terms of your ensuring that a dollar today pays for a dollar of tuition in the future. And it's worth checking out. It's a nationwide plan, and it doesn't often get enough visibility. So check that out as well if you're interested in prepaying tuition dollars today.
Veronica, could I just add one thing to keep in mind with your 529 plan, with your college savings? When the time comes for that beneficiary to go to school, we're talking about any qualified higher education expense at any qualified post-secondary institution. Basically, any place the child can go, the beneficiary can go and use federal financial aid dollars. We're not just talking about four-year residential campuses. We're talking about the four-year degree, the community college degree, the technical school, qualified certificates through an appropriate institution, graduate expenses, professional expenses for an MBA or a medical degree. There's just such a wide variety of expenses and institutions where you can use this really to help that person get to their next stage to fulfill those aspirational college savings goals that hopefully the family's been building up with that student over the years.
Great
That's right.
point.
It's a good point. And just to add to that, we're going to keep adding to each other. I love this. So just to add to that, you could you could spend 2 years at one school and then transfer to another school to finish out a four-year degree and use the $529 at both institutions, assuming they're both qualified higher education institutions.
Got it.
And I think Brian touched on this earlier, but you can also use 529 savings plan funds for graduate school as well. Mm-hmm. If you have anything left over, go ahead and save that just in case the student is ready for that next step.
Makes a lot of sense. What about the performance of our 529 plans? What should we be looking for in that? I would imagine the range of investment performance really varies. So how can we look at that and analyze that? Martha, you want to take a look?
I believe pretty much every state has performance reporting on their website, so that's a great place to start. I know that savingforcollege.com also does a very comprehensive review of performance as well as fees, and really helps you compare what you might get in your state, taking into account any tax advantages that you might get in your state versus the others. So some of those comparison charts are a great place to start. The other thing also is obviously each family needs to determine what level of risk they're willing to take, also based on how old the child is. So one of our most popular options in Florida is the age-based years to enrollment portfolio, which can be really great. The only thing to keep in mind is as the student gets older, if we happen to be in a very turbulent cycle for stock markets and things like that, just to make sure that you as the account owner are keeping an eye on that so that you're comfortable with what's happening there.
Got it. We've got a question from Scott. He's asking, are state tax advantages extended to a person who contributes to their state's 529 plan when they are not the owner of the plan? Brian, do you have any thoughts on that one?
There are some states that allow it and some states that don't. So I'm trying to think of a good example where you can do that. If you're a grandparent, you want to contribute to the 529 plan of a third party. Some state, and remember, there's a little over 30 states that offer state tax benefits for contributing to the plan. So you'll need to check to determine whether or not you have to actually be the account owner or not in order to take advantage of that tax benefit.
Got it. So really check with your state and check with your accountant too about what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. We have another question from, oh, we've got a whole lot of questions to get to here. And I think we may have touched on this before, but Angela is asking, study abroad, can the money be used to support travel, lodging, visa? Martha?
If the program is part of their regular academic pursuits, so if you're in an international studies program and it has an overseas component and it is part of that program, that is almost certainly allowed under a 529 savings plan qualified distribution. It doesn't always count the same if someone decides to take a gap year and travel to Europe. So it does need to be through an accredited institution that these funds are flowing and as part of a program.
Got it. Ben, any thoughts on that?
Just to add on to that, I mean, if I think Martha made the point right there, a qualified institution, and it could be an international institution that is set up to receive federal financial aid dollars from the United States. It could be an international campus for a university housed here in the U.S., but certainly the fees and expenses associated with that particular degree work at the institution would be a covered expense.
Got it.
The only thing there that gets me a little concerned is you mentioned airfare, and airfare typically travel costs are not included as a qualified higher education expense. As Martha mentioned, if it's required for attendance at the school, yes, but you got to be careful there because you could say, well, I'm going to school in California, but I live in Massachusetts, so is that a qualified expense because I need to fly there? And the answer is no. Just because you have to travel to get to the school doesn't mean that it's a qualified expense. So you got to be a little careful about how you're getting to your qualified institution.
Good distinction. Another question from Michelle. She's asking, if a student is working part-time during college, are they better off opening their own 529 plan and taking withdrawals from that over time, or should they simply pay for some of their college costs directly from their own earnings? Brian, any thoughts on that one?
I think that's the same as it's very similar to the question of, is it too late for me to start saving? And I'd say if there's an in-state tax benefit or other perk with your specific plan, the answer would be, yeah, go ahead and put it in a 529 account. But I think for most students in college, if you're earning enough that you can kind of save it, you're better off probably putting it in your bank account or Roth IRA so you have additional versatility in withdrawing those for whatever you need it for, because you may very well need that for who knows what medical expenses or something else. If it's liquid assets, you know that you're going to need it that year. You're missing out on some of the benefits of the federal tax deferrals. So check to see if there's an in-state tax benefit, if you'll get a match, or if there's a grant program or something to that effect. If not, probably better to hold on to it and keep it in either a regular savings account or a Roth IRA if you've got earned income as a student.
Makes sense. We're going to pull up our last question, our last poll question of the day, and let's see what it is. Okay. So want to hear about your plan. So we're asking if am I enrolled or plan to enroll in a 529 plan in the near future? So let us know. Please select yes or no, and we will tally up the vote and let you know what people are planning shortly. So please do that now. So we have a few questions about the best plan for spending down a 529. Like, what's the best way to do that? What's the best approach? Martha, do you have any tips for that one?
I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, and some of it had to do with whether the grandparent or the parent were the account owner at that point. I think in general, it would be better to go ahead and use the funds. You certainly don't want to have to wait until the end and look at, having to withdraw an unqualified expense if you can help that. So, I'm putting on my parent hat. I think I would go ahead and use them as soon as possible.
Brian?
Agree. That's going to be it. It's just going to be agree.
Go for it.
She's hit the nail on the head there.
And Ben, do you have any thoughts on that one?
The only thing I would add is also if the family's in a circumstance where they can continue to keep saving even during the drawdown stage for those out-of-pocket expenses, there could be tremendous value for them for continuing to do so even while the child's in school.
asking also, what are some of the caveats or what are the cautions we need to think about when we're using a 529 plan, or, who is it maybe not the best for? Brian, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Who shouldn't open a 529 account? Well,
that's a tough one for you.
it's a tough question because I think it makes a lot of sense for most people. But if you don't have sufficient income to put away into a savings account, if you have significant credit card debt, if you have other acquired expenses in your future, it might be a good idea to, hold off on saving for college and pay down your debts first. If you're in a very, very low income bracket and you don't, the benefit is a tax deferred benefit. So if you're not paying taxes, focus on getting your financial situation in order first. You're generally going to be better off paying down revolving debt and personal loans than you will be saving for college.
Yeah,
folks that are, go ahead.
One more point to add on to that, Brian, is don't forget to reach out to the other family members and friends. 529 savings plan contributions are a great gift from newborn all the way up to graduation. So if you personally don't have a lot to put in it right now, you can get one open. Many states have gifting portals and things like that where you can have other, you can invite other people to contribute directly into your student's account.
That's a great point.
That makes a lot of sense. So let's see what our poll answers are. We're going to close the poll and we'll see. All right, so it looks like 88% of you are either enrolled or plan to enroll in a 529 plan in the near future. Congratulations. Great.
Oh, what do we do in those 12% though?
Yeah,
we gotta get to those people.
So if you're among the 12%, email us now and let us know what you're thinking about and maybe what's holding you back in a moment. So we have a question from Corey, and Corey's asking, if you contributed to a Roth IRA and had to withdraw the excess contribution, can you put that money directly into a 529 and avoid the penalty for the early withdrawal from the IRA? Now, this may be a better question for an accountant, but I'm going to throw it out to the panel. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I know, Brian, you're a bit more familiar with the tax aspect, or should we ask Corey to check with her accountant on this one?
I would say to check with your accountant, but I will tell you my understanding is that you can't avoid that over withdrawal or over contribution penalty by transferring into a 529 plan. I'm sorry about that, but not a place to put it. I mean, you're welcome to put it into the 529. It's a great spot to save, but as far as avoiding the penalty, no, there's no special exemption or anything.
Got it. Now we have a question from Sharon. She is asking, are 529 contributions tax deductible on a state as well as federal taxes? Brian?
No, there's no federal tax deduction, and the tax benefit by state is going to vary from state to state. So, for example, in Indiana, there's a tax credit where you put in $5,000, you get a $1,000 tax benefit. In Ohio, you get a tax deduction. In Colorado, you get a tax deduction. So you have to check with every state to figure out what each state offers, and the benefit in each state can change from year to year as different legislation is passed. Some of them have expired, some of them have just been introduced. My own home state, Massachusetts, this is the first year you can take a tax deduction for contribution. So, even if you don't get a tax benefit this year, check each year just to see if something new has come along to make it even better.
And we have a question from Angela, and she's asking, can grandparents who are not American deposit money, say, do a wire transfer into a 529?
Oh my goodness, that's a tricky situation. Yeah, there are a lot of status issues that could come into play with that.
Fair enough. So that might be another. We're getting some pretty advanced questions. Arif is asking us to sort of revisit really quickly the prepaid savings plan and saying, give us some of the cons of the prepaid plans. Martha, I don't know if you want to take that one.
Yeah, I'm going to reverse the order of how I answer it, though. So a couple things just to distinguish between what a prepaid plan can offer and what a savings plan can offer. So many of the states' prepaid plans are guaranteed by the state. For example, Florida's is guaranteed. And the savings plans are obviously, they're an investment, and that's a whole different comfort level for some people. So it is important to think through what you're comfortable with, and if you're looking for a guaranteed defined benefit versus looking at how much can I earn over anywhere from that 1 to 18 years plus. So cons of a prepaid plan, I'm gonna have a hard time coming up with something, but surely I can. I think maybe the only thing that you really can't do with a prepaid plan, so I'll use Florida as the example, you can purchase for tuition and fees, as well as dormitory housing. What you can't do with a prepaid plan generally is you can't save for food, you can't save for books, you can't save for computers, all of that under the prepaid. So we usually try and recommend that people that like the prepaid plan and have gone that route, that you also open a 529 savings plan so you can start to save for the rest of those college expenses.
Fair enough. Question from Suzanne. She is asking, what's the best way to compare different 529 plans between the states? So if you're shopping around, how do you do that? Any thoughts, Brian?
That's a layup to me, right? At savingforcollege.com. I like that.
Slightly.
I like what you're asking. So if you go, savingforcollege.com has an excellent tool to help you compare 529 plans. We actually have two tools. One is a brand new tool that allows you to kind of look at the different plans at a high level, compare fees and tax benefits. So you go to savingforcollege.com, you go to the very top left, and right in the menu up there, wait, on my screen it's going to be over here, top left from your point of view, right? And there's going to be a little option there on a drop-down menu that says compare 529 plans, and that will allow you to go in and select whichever items are most important to you and compare. Are there any in-state restrictions? What has the lowest fees? You can look at prepaid plans versus savings plans. So definitely go online, check that out, and it'll help you decide between plans. And if you're still confused, you can shoot a message to our forum at forum.savingforcollege.com, especially since we'll probably never get to all the questions that we were asked this panel.
So many great questions. One last quick question before we sum things up. John is asking, does the beneficiary, if they're a newborn and they don't have a social security number, what do you do in that case? And if you want to set up a 529 plan? Martha, do you have any thoughts on that one?
The parent can go ahead and open a 529 plan in their name, and they can be the beneficiary until such time as they're ready to assign it to the actual student.
Great. All right, well, this has been great. So I'd love for you each to give us perhaps one last tip about opening a 529 or plan. What should we be thinking about? Any things, pitfalls to avoid? Last closing words, advice for our viewers today. Ben, you want to start us off?
I do. If you haven't started saving, start saving now. If you've been saving, congratulations, you're doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing. All of this is going to help you and your beneficiary in the long run. Take advantage of the flexibility of the plan that you're invested in if you're already invested, and do explore and see what your options are if you're not already invested, and get started saving. Get started saving today.
It's always a great idea. Martha?
Yeah, I think also obviously start today. We all agree with that one. The other important thing is to remember that, like we discussed at the very beginning, is you aren't necessarily trying to save $400,000 for your student to go to college. There are lots of different options to look into as far as types of schools, different scholarship programs and things like that. So I think it's looking at it holistically and getting started.
Just take that first step. Brian?
They stole my outro. Normally I like to say start today, but they stole it. It's totally true, right? You hear all these numbers and you get totally just deer in the headlights, and you hold off on saving. The research shows that it takes a few months before people end up opening a 529 plan once they first learn about them. And I discourage people from doing that. Don't get overwhelmed. So my outgoing advice today is going to be, instead of being really nervous and wanting to make sure you pick the right plan, just open an account. Doesn't have to be the perfect account. You can always change it. I tell people 529s are only as complicated as you make them, which I've been mocked for before, because they can be complicated savings vehicles, but you can very easily open an account, put in your money, and just let it ride an age-based product, and it's fire and forget. You can get in and make your own complicated asset allocation. Don't worry about it. Just get the money in there and figure it out as you go along, because the benefits of compound and tax-deferred growth cut both ways. The longer you wait, the more you're going to have to put in to meet that shortfall.
That's so true. And I think above anything, your kids will really thank you when they're not saddled with student debt, whether it's $30,000 or $40,000 with student debt. If you can cut into that debt load for them, even if it's just a little bit, that can have major implications for their life now and in the future. So they will thank you for taking the initiative and taking the extra effort for getting a 529 plan set up for them. So anyway, we have to go, but thank you to all our viewers for all of your great questions, and thank you so much, Martha, Brian, and Ben, for joining us on this panel for Saving for College. Look forward to chatting with you next time.
Thanks,
Thank
Veronica.
Thank you.